My parents left me a worthless painting, but when I found hidden numbers behind it, they rushed to my door. The day my parents moved out of their old house was one soaked in bittersweet memories. Their laughter echoed through the empty halls as movers carted away decades of accumulated belongings, leaving behind only the faint scent of lavender and polish that had always lingered in every corner of our home. I stood amidst the chaos, watching them sort through boxes with a mixture of nostalgia and relief, finally downsizing to that cozy beachfront condo they'd dreamed about for years. As the last truck pulled away, Mom turned to me with an apologetic smile, holding what appeared to be a dusty canvas wrapped in brown paper. "We couldn't bear to part with this," she admitted, pressing it into my hands. "But honestly, sweetheart, it's probably worthless." The painting felt heavier than expected, its surface rough beneath the protective wrapping. Dad chimed in from behind her, adjusting his glasses. "Your grandmother insisted we keep it all these years, but it's just some abstract piece she picked up at a garage sale." I unwrapped it carefully on my kitchen table later that evening, revealing swirling patterns of deep crimson and midnight blue that seemed to dance across the canvas like storm clouds caught in motion. The brushstrokes were erratic yet purposeful, creating shapes that almost suggested human forms struggling against invisible forces. Despite its apparent lack of technical mastery, there was something compelling about the work, a raw emotion that pulsed through each layer of paint. For weeks, the painting leaned against my living room wall, largely ignored except when dusting. It became just another piece of inherited furniture, gathering dust while I navigated the demands of my corporate job and maintained a social life that felt increasingly hollow. My parents called regularly from their new paradise by the sea, sharing stories of sunsets and sand between their toes while I stared at fluorescent office lights and battled traffic during rush hour. Then came the rainy Saturday afternoon when everything changed. While attempting to hang the painting properly, more out of obligation than appreciation, I noticed something unusual about its wooden frame. A slight unevenness caught my eye near the bottom edge. Running my fingers along the surface, I discovered a barely perceptible seam where the backing board met the frame. With trembling hands, I pried it open using a butter knife. Behind the canvas lay a series of numbers meticulously etched into the wooden stretcher bars. They weren't random digits, they formed distinct groups separated by dashes, reminiscent of coordinates or perhaps an elaborate code. My heart quickened as I studied them, tracing each number with my fingertip. Something about their precision suggested intentionality. These weren't accidental marks left by careless handling. Within hours, my quiet apartment buzzed with activity as I photographed the numbers and began researching possible meanings. Online forums dedicated to art authentication proved fruitless, but a chance encounter with an elderly neighbor who had once worked as a museum curator provided a startling revelation. The numbers matched a pattern used by certain European artists during World War II to mark works hidden from invading forces. According to him, such markings often indicated not just provenance but sometimes even secret locations where other artworks had been concealed. The discovery sent shockwaves through my carefully ordered life. Sleep became elusive as scenarios played out in my mind, visions of forgotten masterpieces waiting to be unearthed, of family secrets spanning generations. I reached out to art historians and specialists, each consultation adding layers to the mystery while simultaneously raising more questions. Was my grandmother aware of this hidden code? Had she known the painting's true value all along? 3 days after uncovering the numbers, my phone rang late at night. Caller ID displayed my parents' number, unusual for this hour. When I answered, Mom's voice trembled with an urgency I'd never heard before. "About that painting," she began, then paused as if gathering courage. "Could we come see it tomorrow? There's something we need to discuss." Before I could respond, Dad's voice cut in, equally strained. "It's important, sweetheart. Very important." Their sudden interest struck me as peculiar, especially given how dismissive they'd been about the artwork's value. As I hung up, staring at the painting now propped prominently on my dining table, I couldn't shake the feeling that my parents knew far more about this mysterious inheritance than they'd ever let on. The numbers seemed to pulse with significance in the dim light, each digit a doorway to secrets that might reshape everything I thought I knew about my family's past. When my parents arrived the following morning, they carried themselves differently, their usual casual demeanor replaced by an almost palpable tension. Mom clutched her handbag tightly, while Dad kept adjusting his tie despite the informal setting. They sat stiffly on my sofa, eyes darting toward the painting as if it might suddenly spring to life. The rain tapping against the windows seemed to underscore the awkward silence that stretched between us. "It's about your grandmother," Mom finally blurted out, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. She didn't find that painting at any garage sale. Dad took over, his voice uncharacteristically shaky. During the war, she worked with the French resistance. This painting was entrusted to her by a group of artists hiding from the Nazis. He paused, running a hand through his thinning hair. We thought it was just a family story, something romantic she told us when we were children. We never believed it was real. Mom continued, tears welling in her eyes. She made us promise to keep it safe, to pass it down through the family. But after she passed, we convinced ourselves it was just an old story. We were wrong. Her voice broke as she added, there are others, other paintings hidden away. That's what those numbers mean. Coordinates to secret locations where masterpieces were stashed during the occupation. The revelation hit me like a physical force, knocking the air from my lungs. All this time, I'd been living with a piece of history so significant it could rewrite art history books. Yet what struck me most wasn't the potential monetary value or historical importance. It was the realization of how much my parents had deliberately kept from me. The painting wasn't just a family heirloom, it was a burden they'd tried to unload without fully understanding its weight. We wanted to protect you, Dad explained, his voice cracking. After your grandmother died, people started asking questions. Collectors, historians, even some unsavory characters. We thought if we acted like it was worthless, no one would bother looking. He reached for Mom's hand, their fingers intertwining like lifelines. But now that you've found the numbers, we can't pretend anymore. As they spoke, pieces of my childhood began falling into place. The way my grandmother would disappear into her study for hours, emerging with ink-stained fingers, the whispered phone calls that ceased whenever I entered a room, the careful way she would clean the painting each spring, treating it with reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts. What had seemed like eccentricities now revealed themselves as calculated preservation tactics. The rain intensified outside, matching the storm brewing within me. Here sat my parents, the people who had raised me, taught me right from wrong, shared countless family dinners and holiday traditions, yet they had knowingly withheld a truth that fundamentally altered my understanding of our family's legacy. The painting wasn't just art, it was a testament to bravery, sacrifice, and resistance. And they had treated it like yesterday's newspaper. I don't understand, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why let me believe it was worthless? Mom's response came in a flood of tears. Because we were scared, honey. Scared of what it might bring into your life. Your grandmother lived in constant fear of discovery, of betrayal, of losing everything she worked to protect. We didn't want that life for you. But hadn't they already sentenced me to a different kind of loss? The loss of trust, of shared history, of knowing where I truly came from. As I looked at the painting again, really looked at it, I saw not just colors and shapes but echoes of resistance fighters working by candlelight, of artists defying oppression through their craft, of my own grandmother risking everything to preserve beauty in the face of unimaginable darkness. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the steady rhythm of rain against the windows. My parents sat before me, their faces etched with lines of guilt and fear I'd never noticed before. Each wrinkle seemed to tell a story of sleepless nights spent guarding secrets, of moments when they must have questioned their decision to bury the truth. Dad's hands trembled as he poured himself a glass of water from my kitchen counter, spilling some in the process. Mom absent-mindedly dabbed at her eyes with a tissue that quickly disintegrated in her grasp. I remember the day she gave it to us, Dad said suddenly, his voice distant as if accessing a long-buried memory. Your grandmother called us into her study. It was 1982, just months before she passed. She was so frail, but her eyes, they burned with intensity. He paused, swallowing hard. She made us swear on everything we held dear to protect it. Said it wasn't just art, it was hope preserved. Hope for a future where beauty could triumph over destruction. Mom nodded, her composure beginning to crumble again. Every time we moved, every time we redecorated, we had to figure out how to keep it safe without drawing attention. Do you remember that burglary in '95? I did, vividly. How could I forget the terror of coming home to find our house ransacked, valuables strewn about, yet nothing taken? We thought they were after the painting, Mom confessed. That's why we installed that elaborate security system afterward. Not for jewelry or electronics, for this. A cold shiver ran down my spine as I recalled how they had dismissed my concerns about the expensive security measures, claiming it was simply peace of mind for their retirement years. All this time, they had been protecting not just a painting, but a legacy that spanned generations and continents. The weight of their deception settled heavily upon me, yet I couldn't deny the love and fear that had motivated it. She used to say, Dad continued, his voice thick with emotion, art is the soul of humanity, preserved against the tides of darkness. Whenever we doubted keeping it, those words would echo in our minds. He gestured toward the painting. Look at it, really look. Those aren't just random strokes. They're stories of lives interrupted, of dreams deferred, of resistance captured in pigment and canvas. As I studied the painting anew, I began noticing details I'd previously overlooked, subtle symbols woven into the chaos of color, ghostly impressions of figures that seemed to emerge and dissolve depending on the angle of light. The longer I stared, the more it transformed from abstract art into a tapestry of human experience under duress. My grandmother hadn't merely protected art, she had guarded memories, hopes, and defiance itself. The rain outside evolved into a gentle patter, mirroring the gradual shift in our conversation. No longer accusatory, my questions became exploratory. Did she leave any other clues? Any documents or journals? Mom produced a small leather-bound notebook from her purse, its pages yellowed with age. She wrote everything down, codes, locations, names. But we never dared look too closely. Too dangerous, we thought. As I flipped through the delicate pages, written in my grandmother's elegant hand, I realized we were sitting on a treasure trove of historical significance that transcended mere monetary value. Yet with this knowledge came a crushing responsibility. Each page represented not just information but lives affected, choices made under extreme duress, sacrifices endured. The painting was no longer just an inherited object, it was a key to unlocking stories that deserved to be told, remembered, honored. And here I sat, the reluctant guardian of secrets that had shaped my family's destiny in ways I was only beginning to comprehend. As we delved deeper into the notebook's contents, my parents revealed additional layers of their deception. They had periodically checked the painting's hidden compartment throughout the years, ensuring the numbers remained intact. We thought if we could maintain the illusion of worthlessness, we could keep everyone safe, Mom admitted, her hands still trembling as she traced the notebook's worn cover. But now that you've uncovered the truth, we can't go back to pretending. The gravity of their admission settled over us like a heavy fog. For decades, they had lived parallel lives, the outward appearance of normalcy masking a constant vigilance that must have been exhausting. Every casual dinner party, every family gathering, every Christmas morning had been shadowed by the knowledge of what they were protecting. The strain showed in their prematurely gray hair, in the worry lines etched deep around their eyes, in the way they both seemed to carry themselves slightly bent forward, as if bearing an invisible weight. What happens now? I asked, though I already knew the answer would be complicated. Dad exchanged a meaningful glance with Mom before responding. The choice is yours, sweetheart. You're the next guardian of this legacy. His voice caught on the word guardian, and I understood why. The role carried burdens far beyond simple possession. But know this, once you step fully into this responsibility, there's no turning back. People will come looking. Some will want to help preserve the history, others. He trailed off, letting the implication hang heavy in the air. Mom reached across the coffee table, placing her hand over mine. We shielded you from this world because we wanted you to have a normal life. But now that you've found the numbers, you've stepped into a different reality. She gestured toward the painting, now illuminated by shafts of late afternoon sunlight breaking through the dissipating rain clouds. That painting isn't just art, it's a bridge to the past. To artists who risked everything to create, to resist, to survive. To your grandmother, who sacrificed so much to protect their work. The enormity of the situation crystallized in that moment. Beyond the immediate implications of possessing potentially valuable artwork lay a moral imperative that transcended personal gain or family drama. These weren't just paintings hidden away, they represented acts of defiance against tyranny, expressions of humanity created under the most oppressive circumstances imaginable. Each number etched into the wooden frame connected to stories that needed telling, artists whose voices had been silenced by history's darkest chapter. As I studied my parents' faces, lined with years of careful deception, yet glowing with the pride of finally sharing their burden, I realized that the painting's true worth couldn't be measured in dollars or gallery space. Its value lay in the courage it represented, in the lives it touched, in the resistance it embodied. And now, whether I was ready or not, that responsibility rested squarely on my shoulders. Profile. Quen 2.5 max. The room fell silent again, but this time it wasn't the tense, guarded quiet of before. Instead, it was a shared stillness, a collective pause as we all absorbed the gravity of what lay ahead. My parents sat close together on the couch, their shoulders touching, their hands clasped tightly. They looked smaller somehow, more fragile, like the weight they'd carried for so long had finally begun to lift, but not without leaving its mark. I turned back to the painting, letting my eyes trace the swirling colors once more. In that moment, I saw it differently, not just as an abstract piece of art or even as a historical artifact, but as a living thing. It pulsed with stories, with resilience, with the courage of those who had created and protected it. And now, it was mine to honor. Tell me everything, I said softly, breaking the silence. Everything you know about where these other paintings might be. Everything Grandma told you. Dad nodded slowly, exhaling deeply as though preparing himself for what he was about to share. Your grandmother kept meticulous records in that notebook, he began, gesturing toward the worn leather volume on the table between us. But she also left clues within the artwork itself. She believed that true preservation meant embedding the truth into the art, so only someone who truly understood its significance could decipher it. Mom leaned forward, her voice trembling slightly. She used to say, "Art is both shield and sword." The paintings were designed to hide in plain sight, beautiful enough to be cherished, but cryptic enough to conceal their secrets. That's why the numbers are hidden behind the canvas. Anyone could admire the painting, but only someone willing to look deeper would find the key. As the afternoon light shifted, casting golden hues across the room, we pored over the notebook together. Each page revealed fragments of a map, encoded messages, and names of artists whose works had vanished during the war. There were sketches of symbols embedded in the corners of certain paintings, descriptions of locations where pieces had been stashed, and even references to allies who had helped smuggle the artworks to safety. One entry stood out, a detailed account of a chateau in southern France, abandoned after the war and sealed off by the resistance. According to Grandma's notes, several masterpieces were hidden there, protected by booby traps and false walls. Another mentioned a network of caves near the Swiss border, where crates of canvases had been buried beneath layers of earth and stone. The numbers on our painting corresponded to coordinates leading to one of these sites. "It's not going to be easy," Dad warned, his tone grave. "Some of these places may no longer exist. Others might have fallen into disrepair, or worse, been discovered by people who don't have the best intentions. If word gets out about what you found..." He didn't finish the sentence, but I understood. This wasn't just about preserving art, it was about navigating danger, secrecy, and moral dilemmas. For hours we talked, about Grandma's bravery, about the sacrifices made by artists and resistance fighters, about the responsibility that came with knowing too much. By the time night fell, the rain had stopped completely, and the air felt lighter, as if the storm outside mirrored the emotional tempest inside. Eventually, Mom spoke up, her voice gentle but firm. "We're sorry we kept this from you for so long. We thought we were doing the right thing. But now you're ready. You've always had your grandmother's spirit, even if you didn't realize it. She trusted us to pass this legacy on when the time was right, and that time is now." Her words struck a chord deep within me. All my life, I'd felt like something was missing, like there was a part of myself I couldn't quite grasp. Now I understood, it wasn't just about belonging to a family, it was about carrying forward a mission bigger than any one person. This wasn't just my inheritance, it was my purpose. The days that followed were a whirlwind of research, planning, and preparation. With my parents' guidance, I reached out to trusted art historians, archivists, and experts in World War II history. Together, we formed a small team dedicated to uncovering the lost artworks while ensuring their protection. Every step felt monumental, every decision weighed heavily with the knowledge that lives had depended on keeping these secrets safe. Our first expedition took us to the chateau in southern France. Standing before the crumbling estate, I felt a mix of awe and trepidation. The place seemed frozen in time, its grandeur overtaken by ivy and decay. As we explored its dusty halls, guided by Grandma's notes, we discovered hidden compartments behind faded tapestries and loose floorboards concealing crates filled with canvases. Some were damaged, others remarkably intact, but each one bore the unmistakable mark of genius born under duress. It wasn't just the art that moved me, it was the realization that every brushstroke represented defiance. These weren't mere paintings, they were acts of rebellion, declarations of hope in the face of despair. Holding them in my hands, I felt connected to everyone who had risked everything to create and protect them. Word of our discoveries spread cautiously through trusted channels, drawing attention from museums, collectors, and historians worldwide. But we remained vigilant, careful not to reveal too much too soon. The stakes were high, and the risks were real. Still, with each recovered piece, I felt a growing sense of fulfillment, a sense that I was honoring not just my grandmother's memory, but the countless others whose voices had been silenced. Months later, standing in a gallery where some of the recovered works were displayed for the first time, I found myself overwhelmed with emotion. The exhibit was titled Echoes of Resistance, and it told the story not just of the art, but of the people behind it, their struggles, their triumphs, their humanity. Visitors moved through the space in reverent silence, pausing to read plaques detailing the harrowing journeys of each piece. My parents stood beside me, tears in their eyes as they watched strangers engage with the legacy they had guarded for so long. "She'd be proud," Mom whispered, squeezing my hand. "Of all of us." And in that moment, I knew she was right. This wasn't the end of the journey. There were still more paintings to find, more stories to tell, but it was a beginning. A chance to bring forgotten voices back to life, to remind the world of the power of art to transcend even the darkest times.